So, Brad, there are moments in life where you realize that, you think you're intelligent, and then you come up against something where you're like, oh, I'm the dumbest human being alive. I have no grounds to stand on any sort of intelligence here. So I'll tell you what I mean. I'm finally making the plunge and thinking about getting an electric car, and I was like, all right, so I've got to start researching where and how to install the electric vehicle charger on the house, right? And so I was like, okay.
Oh, yeah, because you need one of those now.
Yeah. And don't get me wrong, I'm going to hire an electrician. I'm not a dummy.
Yeah,
I'm going to, but in the days leading up to the electrician, I was like, I don't even know what I don't know. I do some research on this. And Brad, no one understands less than Dave Kellett the difference between volts and amps and ohms and watts and then kilowatts and then kilowatts per hour and kilowatts per mile. I am so damn confused. I feel like I'm dumber now after a day of research than when I started yesterday. I'm pretty good at picking up a topic. Holy hell, it's taken me a long time to wrap my head around volts and amps and ohms.
Because you're kind of a sciencey guy. I mean, you dig this.
No, let's walk away from that real quick.
You do a lot more of this kind of reading than I do. Let's put it that way. You're tuned into some of this stuff.
Tuned in the way a toddler is paying attention to the news that their parents are watching on the TV. That's how I'm tuned in. Yeah.
If I were to do this, I would literally say, "Oh, we need to hire an electrician to put a thing on the house so we can charge," and that would be as far as my thought process would go. I wouldn't even be like, "Oh, I've got to understand amps," because I would assume there's something in the car that says, "Okay, you got this much charge, so you can get this many miles." Is that not the case?
Yes. Well, yes, but so here's why, and again, I'm hiring an electrician. They're going to know these answers. I don't know why I'm just giving myself this task, but I want to future-proof it because I hate paying to do a job twice.
Oh, yes.
So I want to do it so that 5 to 10 years from now, I don't have to pull a heavier gauge wire or a thicker gauge wire to have two chargers or to have two chargers that are talking to each other or, that kind of thing. Because when my wife goes electric, we're going to need to be able to charge two cars.
Yeah.
Now, the caveat here being that I just talked to a friend that has two electric cars, and he's like, "Oh, my wife and I just switch off. You only need to charge like once a week."
And
I was like,
sense.
"Oh, okay."
That makes sense.
Still, I want to future-proof it because I know like Kia cars can charge way faster than everybody else because they use a different voltage. So I'm like, all right, well, I need to be able. Cars in the next 10 years are going to get way better at this.
Right.
I want to have, like, not maximum, but I really want to future-proof it. So I was like, you know what? I'm going to spend the day reading about it. And holy hell, I am a dumber human being than when I started.
And the only thing that would make this worse if you find out next week that they've switched the whole charging cable to USB, and you're going to be spending all this time putting it in one way and then turning it and putting it in the other way and then turning it and putting it in the first way. And you're going to lose all that time you're saving charging. If they go USB, you're going to lose all that time.
See, that's so the thing is, I put in USB 2 for my car, and you're supposed to put in USB 3.
Oh my God.
That's where I went wrong.
Just hearing you say that makes me frustrated.
The thing is, like, as a consumer of the last 20 years and seeing how dongles change every 5 years, I was like, I'm going to future-proof this MFer. I don't want to do this twice. And so, I want as heavy a gauge wire as I can put in. I want as robust of time of use meter as I can put in, because I don't know how many of these things I'm going to need as time goes on. And anyway, what's to say, Brad? I'm not good at this. I know the electrician is going to get here and just kind of do one of those pats on my shoulder and be like, there, why don't you let me handle this?
Yeah. Listen, Mr. Kellett, here's what we've got in the truck.
And on that note, I'm going to say hello, everybody, and welcome to Comic Lab, the show about making comics.
And making a high wattage living from comics. I'm Brad Geiger, the editor of the Webcomics Handbook on Substack and the creator of Evil Inc.
And I'm his amped-up friend, Dave Kellett, the cartoonist of Drive and Sheldon and co-director of Stripped.
And this week's Hour of Comics Advice is made possible by your support at patreon.com/comiclab. So Dave, Let's talk comics.
Let's talk comics, my friend. I see your 1,000-watt smile. I see you're ready to do this show.
Look
now,
at
here's
Johnny
the deal.
Thesaurus over there.
Tell me how 1,000 watts translates into 40 amps. You tell me, Brad, because I tried to do the math yesterday and I couldn't figure it out.
And more importantly, I can't tell you how it figures into miles. I just recently started figuring out how to figure out mileage, like how many miles to the gallon. You know,
that's a whole other thing. Is like trying to figure out how far a kilowatt mile gets you, or a kilowatt hour. Like I just at the end of the day yesterday figured out that volts times amps gives you watts, right?
Of course it does.
And from there, you can figure out, based on your car's architecture, how many miles per kilowatt you're going to get.
Uh-huh.
Brad, it's a lot.
This sounds horrible. This sounds horrible.
It's horrible. And here's the thing. We're all going to have to learn it because we grew up figuring out, like, well, if I've got about 5 gallons of gas, I know how far I can get.
Yeah.
We're going to need to know this. And so I got to learn it. But holy hell, I'm not good at it, Brad. I'm not good at it.
All I do is when that little light comes on that shows the gas pump, I know sooner or later. And then I've got a little bit of my dad in me where I'm like, I can get one more mile. I can get a couple more miles before I have to pull over.
All right, kids, windows up, AC off. We can get one more mile out of this.
That's right. We can squeeze this out till we're on
going to
fumes.
reduce air reduction and reduce. Okay, so anyway, let's turn, Brad, to a topic which we're a little bit more specialized in the making of comics and the making of living of comics. And so I've got a question. I've got a question that came in over at patreon.com/comiclab, and it's from our friend Josh. And Josh writes, "Hello, comic gurus. Longtime listener, first-time question asker, and backer." Thank you, Josh.
Welcome,
That's fantastic.
Josh.
I'm still pretty new to writing comics, and lately have been wanting to write humor, but I am struggling.
Yeah.
I've read a few books on writing humor, but none have helped so far. My question is, do you guys have any exercises to prime the humor writing pump? Thanks as always for an amazing podcast, and I'm looking forward to a million more. Yeah. So, Brad, take us through here. How do we write humor, Brad?
Geez, Josh just got here. Are we gonna chase
Josh
him away?
Just got here.
This
I like
early?
how you're like, slow it down, Josh, with the big questions.
Yeah, well, I mean, do you have any exercises that you do to prime the right? Do you do any of that? I mean,
so I'm going to be honest to Josh and to the world. This is a hard question.
Yeah,
because I will give you, and I'm going to give you possibilities for how you can improve your humor writing. Yeah. With the caveat that it is not an overnight thing. If you're not a funny person to begin with, it's going to take you the better part of a decade, I would think, to get passably funny, right?
Yeah.
And I will say it in terms that are fair to all of us. I do not have an ear for music. I can't tell an F sharp from an E from an A. I don't know it. The only reason I say this is because visually, I recently bought a guitar because I need a new hobby. I can't read the news anymore, so I need a new hobby. And so I bought a guitar, and I was trying to tune it for the first time, and Fender has this visual app that tells you, like, hey, you're getting close, keep going, keep tightening. You're getting close to an A. There, now, stop. You're at an A, right?
Yeah.
But here's the thing, Brad. It took a visual to tell me when I was getting to the A. Like, I couldn't hear a goddamn thing about how close I was. I just don't have an ear for it. And some people don't have an ear for humor.
Yeah.
And I think that's, from the start, that's worth acknowledging it, is that Josh, our friend, and others just might not have the ear for humor.
Yeah.
But I've bought a guitar. I'm going to try to get an ear for music. And Josh is starting a comic, and he's going to try to get an ear for humor. Yeah. So what are some suggestions, Brad, that we can give Josh with that big caveat right up front?
Yeah, with the caveat that maybe this isn't for you. Right?
We'll talk about that for a minute.
Something that we've got to acknowledge is that if you don't have like Dave says, an ear for humor, right? And we've used in the past the phrase "a good sense of humor," and already we're getting questions. Well, what does that mean? A good sense of humor? And so I
can tell you, I can give you my poor man's definition.
Go ahead.
When you say things, do people laugh intentionally?
You know what? It's on. Here we go. Okay. There's two things. This is going to be. I got to admit, I kind of love talking about this stuff. Okay. So a sense of humor number one, is a faulty phrase because it applies to a giver of humor and a receiver of humor.
It's both receptive and outgoing. Yes, I see.
So a good sense of humor to tell a joke, for example, involves a good sense of humor. To understand that you just heard a joke and to get the joke also involves a good sense of humor. So I don't like that. I think we need better words because already people are, well, what's the sense of humor? But you said, so you tell a joke and people laugh. Yes. However, writing humor is a whole different thing because I can make somebody laugh 100 different ways in how I speak, in what their relationship to me is. Have you ever heard the person that, and by the way, I fall into this every now and again, they tell you a joke and then they start laughing really hard, so you start laughing really hard. Yes. I've done that a couple times where I'm like, this ain't going over. I'm going to start the laugh. They're going to join me.
I got to prime this pump.
Which I think we all do that a little bit. That's a human thing.
That's a performative trick. Yeah, exactly.
Telling a joke and then putting it down and making that joke come across on paper in the written word is a whole different thing too. And I would argue, I think it's maybe a little bit harder than live humor.
Yeah, I really like that you have drawn a distinction between the ability to receive a joke and the ability to give a joke or create a joke, which is even different. I have long in my life related it to the capacity of a wire. Like a 4-gauge wire versus a 6-gauge wire. And their capacity, how many amps can that wire take over a certain distance of feet? You know what I mean? So for example, if a 4-gauge wire can handle up to 50 amps, but you have that wire going up to 100 feet. Yeah. Now the amperage is going to drop down over that 100 feet, right? Yeah. Just like a sense of humor, Brad. Absolutely. I think we can all see this.
Absolutely. So, we've got, and you know what the bad thing about this? Right now, we've got one person in our audience saying, oh my God, humor finally makes sense to me. This I can do.
There's an electrician out there going,
I can do. Yeah, I can be funny.
There's an electrician going, holy shit, once you change it to the gauge of a wire, now I understand. Yeah.
Now I get it. Now set those ohms out.
I will say this, though, all joking aside about electricity, think about a wire as the baseline for communication between humans, right? Yeah. So me being able to receive a joke that Brad is telling me informs my future ability to tell a joke or write a joke. They're not completely correlative, but they are related. There is a baseline of a muscle, let's say a muscle memory of giving and receiving jokes, right?
Yeah.
And I will say that if you didn't grow up in a funny household or with funny friends, you're basically starting with a muscle that has not been worked. Like I grew up in a damn funny household where all my brothers and sisters were constantly harassing each other with delightful jokes. I mean, it was a jokey, sing-songy house, and Brad had a big family too that was also jokey. And my wider community was also really jokey. It was a really funny. I mean, communities that have a lot of guilt tend to have a lot of humor, and so my house had both of those in spades. And you end up with a funny sense of humor. And so so I will say that Brad started from an easier place because we already had 18 years of muscle memory by the time we left our house, right? So if you grew up in a quiet house or a house that didn't joke much or friends that didn't joke much, you might be starting fresh. It's like doing a sport you've never played before and getting that muscle going.
And it might, I mean, I think humor comes from other places too. We have friends that had very difficult childhoods where they were ostracized maybe or picked on or any number of reasons that it happens.
Right.
And they developed humor very quickly as a defense mechanism. Right. They could defuse the situation.
But wouldn't you say, yes, I agree with you. I know I can think of two friends specifically that was the case for. But the thing that was that for them was, it was very much a survival strategy and the specific life of the mind that they lived in, where they were constantly having a conversation with themselves, to themselves, Robin Williams style. Like Robin Williams grew up alone, like as a single child, didn't really have playmates, and so created this life of a mind for himself with all these different characters. And the friends that I can think of that as you've just described, they had a really strong life of the mind as a survival mechanism for a shitty childhood. So yes, I'm not saying that there's one path to humor. What I'm saying though is that you and I grew up in big jokey houses, and that got us started basically.
Yeah. So all of which to say is, if
that sigh,
because I think we're not being honest with people if we don't start by saying maybe you're not funny. And that's got to be the first part of the conversation. Is if you're saying, well, how do I get started? How do I, this question, the first thing I look at, or the first thing I think when I see this question is maybe you're not funny. And by the way, that's not that's not a put down. It's not an insult. There's 100 other things that you could write that isn't necessarily humor, right? You can write adventure, sci-fi, you can write romance, you can write very serious stuff, technical manuals, autobiographies, stuff like that.
Histories,
Yes, you can do a lot with cartooning that isn't humor. If humor isn't something that comes somewhat naturally to you, it's going to be a long uphill battle. That's the first thing I'm going to say, is that maybe you're not funny. Now, here's where it gets really difficult to give advice on this topic, because having just said that, here's the second thing I'm going to say. The only way to learn how to write funny is to spend an awful lot of time writing things that you try to be funny and flop miserably. And just die on the floor in angry death. And
I'll tell you what, ask Brad how he knows that.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. Ask me how I know. In fact, we're going to talk about Blue Sky a little bit later on in the show. So I've been seeing great engagement on Blue Sky. So I'm like, okay, I'm going to try a few things to keep some content going there. One of the things, and I've advocated this in the past, make use of your archive. I've started posting something called This Date in Evil Link History. Because I've got archives that go back to, just Evil Link alone, go back to 2005. So I can very easily on my WordPress setup go into the media library, type in the date. Today is 11/13, 1113, and because of how I've posted everything by date, all the comics that I posted that come up with that date. Are there. And then I download it and I've got the post. It takes me 2 to 5 minutes to put that together, right? So I've been going through a lot of my own stuff, going all the way back to 2005, so I can post This Date in Evil Link History just to see if I can get engagement going and see what's going on, see if that's something worth pursuing. Again, we've said before, we're going to say in the update, once you see something that gives you a heartbeat, especially in this day and age, you want to go after it and see what you can do. So I've been looking at a lot of my old stuff. Holy shit, have I ever written a lot of stuff that just didn't work. I thought it worked at the time and for any number of reasons. And I had to do all of that to write stuff now that I think is connecting really well. And I've got lots of proof in Kickstarters and Patreon and interactions with community. I know this stuff is hitting now a lot, and certainly a lot better than it used to. But I had to write all that crap, years worth of crap that I was doing 5 craps a week for years at a time in order to get to the point where I think I'm writing humor that's a real a cut above. I'm connecting with a lot more regularity than I ever did. So on one hand, maybe you're not funny. On the other hand, the only way to get funny is to be unfunny for a long, long time and learn from it. You got to not only write that unfunny stuff, but then once you're in a place where you've got enough separation, and it doesn't have to be years, look at that and empirically, calmly, passionlessly say, why didn't that work? Well, how could I have made that better? Because what happens an awful lot is you see somebody posting something unfunny. They'll insist that it was funny. They'll say all those things that we always hear. Oh, I'm just posting my sense of humor. I'm following my heart. That's great. Not great for audience building, but you do you. You've got to take a look at some point and empirically go down and say, why didn't that work? What could I have done to make that better? How could I have let myself off the hook? I am a big proponent of going into the critique channel in Writer's Room, and you can go in there and see on the Discord server people getting really good advice and then not having the courage to take that advice, or not having the wisdom, the good sense. Somebody gives them a really, really good swing, and they're like, nah, well, okay, they do this all the time. They post a finished comic. And then it's like, well, what are you going to do with this information? You're not going to fix it.
Right.
You've got to have the ability not only to write that crap, but to learn from the crap. And that's the only way you get to be a better writer.
Yeah, I let's take a second. I want to co-sign what Brad said, which is, yes, there are many types of and flavors of humor.
Yeah.
But it might just be that maybe you're not funny. That is worth acknowledging, that maybe you're just not funny. I will say, if you want to do it, I will give you a couple bits of advice, but humor, as Brad said, is improved in the doing.
Yeah.
The describing of humor, to me, where it falls apart, or describing how to do humor or how to do joke making, is a little bit like, Brad, I want you to imagine the most passionate French kissing you can, right? The most the most passionate French. All the sparks are flying, Brad, right? In French kissing. Now imagine me writing a short essay to someone who has never French kissed before.
Yes.
Describing the hows, whats, the whens, right? Like, then the hand will go here. Then the head will tilt forward 2 degrees and to the left and right.
Yeah.
And then the tongue pressure should be the equivalent of a 1 pound per square inch. And you're like trying to describe how much tongue, how little tongue, how much force. All of which to say is, it's the wrong tools for the job to describe what French kissing is, because they are so fundamentally different. The act of French kissing versus the logical description in words, on text, on a page of what French kissing is. And I think a lot of the books about writing humor suffer from a similar problem, which is not that they're oppositional, but just that they're such worlds apart in terms of what they are in the activity itself. The activity of joke making is so much different than the description that you often see of joke making, that it falls a little hard for people for whom it's not natural. This is what I'm trying to say. So here's what I will say, what I think you should do if you want. First of all, write a lot. As Brad said, he and I had the better part of a decade, 2 decades, maybe even right now, if I'm being honest about it, where I'm still trying to write good jokes, right? And so the doing of it is really important. You need to be writing 5 jokes, 10 jokes a day so that you get one good one every day, right?
Yeah.
That's number 1. Number 2 is, I would recommend, and this is a personal thing, but the performative aspect really works for me. Find an improv class in your major metropolitan city, Upright Citizens Brigade, Groundlings, Second City. There's a lot of places around the U.S. and Canada that offer improv, especially for people like you, who it's usually corporate, like corporations that require better public speaking. So they're like, let's send all our employees to improv, right? It's fine. You'll get a sense of what a joke feels like to be making it in real time, right? Yeah. And it will, honest to God, start to firm up those humor-making muscles. That's number 2. Number 3 is watch really good comedy writing. So The Simpsons, Futurama, those are joke-making factories. I mean, Futurama had like a staff that was, first of all, it was like one of the most educated humor writing staffs. There's like 9 PhDs on that staff. They were all funny as hell. The Simpsons is like, especially those magic seasons between like season 3 and season, 15, 10, something like that. Those were just a factory of jokes. They were so good. Try out mood-based comedy like Curb Your Enthusiasm. Patton Oswalt is a good one. What I'm saying is, listen to good jokes at the same time you are practicing good joke writing, at the same time you are physically doing improv jokes. And over the course of 7 to 10 years, you will get better at joke making. You might not be the funniest human being alive, but you will get better at it. But that's my suggestion, Brad. But even, again, with the caveat that you might not be funny. So that's also possible.
Yeah. Well, and also read humor. Because, again, with this idea that, and by the way, everything you said is valid. And it's stuff that I do and swear by. But also I would add read read comics that you think are funny. With the idea of analyzing.
Yeah, why did that work? How did that work? Yeah.
Make that humor work? How did they manufacture that moment so that it hit with you?
Right.
All of those things are very, very instructive. And it goes beyond, like when Dave is talking about watching The Simpsons or Futurama, it's not necessarily passive watching, it's active watching. Watching with an active brain and saying, okay, what just happened there? What made that funny? Yeah. How did that happen? Like, it's not passive, it's active.
Right. How did that payoff from 10 minutes ago get paid off now in the way Bart said the thing? Right. That kind of thing. Yeah.
Now, as far as, like the question asker says books, he's read a bunch of books on comedy. And I'll be the first to say, I kind of love those books a little bit.
Do you? You like reading about French kissing being described analytically? Yeah.
I kind of do. For the same reason I loved Comedians in Cars Getting Coffee, because I like hearing people talk about the process.
Sure, right? Sure. By the way, that show, I would also highly recommend that show for talking about the process of joke making and joke delivery. Yes,
just the Bob Einstein episode alone is a masterclass.
Which one's Bob Einstein?
He was the guy with the real gravelly voice he also was in Curb Your Enthusiasm.
Oh, was he Super Dave Osborne?
Yes.
Yeah, he's great. He was. I think he passed.
Yes, he did.
But he was great.
He's also Albert Brooks's brother. Did you know that?
Oh, that's right. I forgot he was out. By the way, what a funny family that must have been.
Oh, and you know about the father, right? You know the father. The father was a comedian.
Oh, yeah.
Who died on stage at the Friars Club.
Can I tell you, I know a TV writer family in Los Angeles, and I won't say who they are, but their dad wrote for Mary Tyler Moore, and all three sons are the funniest motherfuckers in because they just grew up in a house that analyzed jokes all day long.
Yes.
And that's the thing. It's like Brad's saying, you're not just passively looking at jokes, you're analyzing jokes. You're actively looking at jokes. Like, for example, my wife and I, who both write humor, we will be driving home from a party. I talked about this on the show before. Yeah. We'll be driving home from the party and we'll be saying to one another, that joke was solid. You really landed that turn.
Yeah.
I would have given it another second before you did the reveal. Yeah, you're right. I did. I was excited to tell the joke. Yeah. But it would have landed a little bit better had you given it a pause. And we'll be doing that around the kitchen too as we're doing dishes. We'll be like, that was solid, but you didn't really land the punchline. No, I know. I should have did a shorter word choice. We will, honest to God, analyze jokes all the time in our life.
Yeah.
And it's really effective. It's a fun. Brad and I will do this in conversation with each other on the phone. Yeah. We do all the time.
Like we'll just give it a little tweak. Like, okay, I like that punchline. Change this to this, and it's a titch better.
And there's no offense on either one of our parts. If Brad corrects me, I'm like, you know what? You're right. That was a solid. That was a solid revise.
I love those conversations. I love talking shop in terms of that. And in fact, when we do it on Writer's Room, it's often a lot of fun. But here's the thing. Having said that, I love the books. Scott Dikkers, I think his name is pronounced. It's Dikkers. So it's Dikkers or Dikers. He was a top guy at The Onion, and he wrote a good book.
I mean, you can't go into comedy with unless you have a name like Dikkers. You've got to go into
Dikkers. I mean, what was he going to do? He wasn't going to be a butcher.
I mean, it's either that or urologist. I don't know what he's going to do, you
know? Better than butcher. But anyway, he did a very good, and I like listening to audiobooks here in the studio. So I often put something like that on just to have it in the background. In fact, I'm going to give you one to listen to at the end of this topic that has nothing to do with comedy, but I'm really loving. But the problem with that is, and there's another one, Mel Smith, How to Write Comedy, that goes way back in the day. All those books are great. The only problem is, Dave, every time I try to put something like that to use, it's like you've tied one hand behind my back. It's not the way my brain thinks. I'm trying to manufacture something that often comes out of a natural process that I've done over the years.
Right.
And even like I've written now or participated in 2 books on that have had chapters devoted to how to write funny, right? And I looking back at those chapters, it's really hard to say, okay, here's how you write something funnier, here's how you write something funny. I can tell you how to take something funny and make it funnier. I can give you lots of strategies for exploding the humor and driving the concept and all kinds of things that help you. It takes a concept and maximize the humor potential out of it. But I can't tell you how to do that first step. Like the whole question is about priming the pump. How do you get started? I can't write that chapter. I can tell you how, once you got started and got your engine going, how to take that and explode it. I can tell you how to take something good and make it better. Right. But I can't tell you how to get started. And that's the real bug with this. All those books that do try to do that. And Scott's book is probably the most well-known. If you can use that advice, your brain works so much differently than mine.
Yeah. I think, though, the thing that I keep coming back to is it's only in the doing that you get better. And the thing that I go to a lot is that everyone that ever heard that, like live guitarists that heard Jimi Hendrix play. Yeah. Like, who was the lead guitarist for Cream?
Eric Clapton.
Eric Clapton. When Eric Clapton heard Jimi Hendrix play for the first time, he apparently started cussing and was like so angry that someone was that good, right?
Yes.
And so, but the thing that I took away from hearing this story, and then when the Beatles heard Jimi Hendrix, they were also like, holy shit, how is this guy doing this? Is that Hendrix would apparently just play all the time.
Yes.
He would get done with a concert and then he would literally ask his people, like, where is there a small club opened? And would just go play with bands that were not very good, but he just wanted to play more, right? Yeah. Just to keep playing. And there's something to be said for that, no matter what art form you're trying to do, is that just constantly doing and writing jokes will make you better. You can't get worse, as Brad always says. Yeah. You will get better over time if you just constantly do it. But I will say, too, I want to put this out in there, is that some people's brains are just built differently.
Yeah.
And I want to say that it might be that you're, like, for example, people that are that have aphantasia, where they can't picture images in their heads. That's, I don't know anything about living that life because I have a very vivid imagination, but that's got to be hard to try to go down the path of being a visual artist if you have aphantasia, right? Because it's just so, well, I'll just put it this way. It's just so different. I can't imagine how that would work in terms of imagining images that you're going to draw if you have aphantasia.
Right.
Similarly, if you have anhedoralia, where you don't have an inner monologue and you don't have a voice talking to you from you, it must be harder to write jokes. It has to be, because I'm constantly talking to myself all day long about, and like making jokes to myself that literally will never be said to anyone, but I'm making myself laugh in my head. So if you've got anhedoralia, it's got to be harder to write jokes, right?
Yep.
Similarly, for friends that have any sort of spiciness in terms of mental spiciness, there's got to be, that's got to be a different path than the one I walk. And so all of them, though, I would say you cannot get worse at writing humor if you're doing it constantly. If you're practicing writing jokes constantly, hanging out with funny people, taking it as much humor writing as you can, actively listening to it as you go, and trying some performative comedy and improv, that's the best way that I can describe getting funnier over the course of a decade.
Yes, 100% yes. And the last point I'm going to make here is, if that doesn't excite you, the idea of writing 5 jokes a day, or the idea of devoting the next 10 years to learning how to land a punchline in the written word, if that doesn't excite you, then you're probably not the right person for this. Because, like, I do humor for one reason and one reason only. I am obsessed with the idea of making laughter happen in 100 different ways.
Yes.
Right?
Yes. It's a drug for you and I, don't you think?
I can't not write something funny.
It's also a survival strategy.
Yes. Oh, yeah. Even the sexy stuff that I write is funny. Like,
right.
I can't just
even the
write.
sci-fi stuff that I write is funny.
Yes.
Yeah, so you and I are the same way.
So
Yeah.
if you were to say, "Oh, Brad, write a romance," it's going to be a romantic comedy. If it's gonna. I can't do anything else. And if you're not like that, you may not be the right person to write comedy, because you need that obsession, I think, to a certain degree. That the only thing that gets you to write 10 years worth of bad jokes so that you can start year 11 and write one that's not quite so bad is obsession.
Right.
And by the way, again, I want to go back to what we said in the very, very beginning of the show, and that is that's not a death sentence. That's not an insult. There's 100 other things for you to write. If you're trying to write comedy and you're just not funny, then live in the brain that you have and write something else. There's nothing worse. And I've seen it happen. I've seen it happen where people spent, and I'm telling you, Dave, in the case of one person I'm thinking of, 20 years of writing stuff. He just did not understand what humor was. It was mystifying to this person.
Right.
And I wanted this person so badly to do anything else other than humor, because you could just tell humor was never going to click with this person. Right. You might want to, if the idea that Dave says is you got to write like 5 jokes a day and you've got to be obsessed with this. If that doesn't excite you, if playing a concert like Jimi Hendrix and then going to a small club and playing again doesn't excite you, you might not be the right person for this genre. Because it's going to take a little bit of obsession. It's going to take a little bit of doggedness. It's going to take a little bit of persistence, because it's the only way that you're going to make this happen.
Yeah, I will agree with that. And now I will downplay that severity slightly by saying that's Brad and I trying to tell you, if you want to get really good, if you just want to get a little bit better, just do half of what we suggested in terms of percentage. You'll still get better over the course of a decade. Don't you think, Brad? Like, if you write 1 joke a day and you actively watch 1 episode of Simpsons a week, and you take 1 improv class every 3 years, you'll still get a little better. I'm just saying there's a spectrum here, Brad, is what I'm saying.
Something is better than nothing.
Something is better than nothing.
Yes.
Absolutely.
Now, I promised you a tip. I said I was going to say it at the end. I'm going to save it for pro tips, because I actually did start reading one book that has really got me excited about humor writing. I'm going to save it for pro tips. And you'll never guess in 100 years what that book is.
All right. I'm looking forward to it.
It's the kind of book that I wouldn't have read if you would have stuck a gun to my head. But I read it on the weirdest reason ever, and now it has so many practical applications to what I'm doing. It's unbelievable. I'll save it for pro tips, because it's a whole. I don't want to filibuster here. So I'll save it for pro tips, where we go deep on those things. Your jaw's gonna drop.
And for those not familiar, Pro Tips is our weekly podcast that goes out exclusively to our friends and backers over at patreon.com/comiclab.
Yeah.
So since Brad just mentioned that he's putting this on Pro Tips, I will highly suggest you join us, because there are now over 300 episodes of Pro Tips where we go deep on specific topics. And we do Writer's Room, which a lot of people have told us is really helpful in seeing how a joke is constructed. It's Brad and I taking 20, 30 minutes, starting from nothing, coming up with ideas, and then refining those ideas in real time, mostly succeeding, but occasionally failing too. And I think that's really instructive as well, is when we fail. So join us over at patreon.com/comiclab and get over 300 episodes of Pro Tips and Writer's Room. Hey, if you're listening while you work, take a minute to stand and stretch.
And while you're doing that, we're going to tell you why you should join us on Patreon.
When you do, you're going to get hours and hours of podcasts that we've recorded just for backers.
And exclusive Patreon posts that go even deeper on Comic Lab topics.
And access to our exclusive Discord server, which is a thriving community of professional cartoonists.
So you can support the show you love and get tons of actionable resources for your own cartooning.
And listen, if you can't swing a pledge this month, we get it. No worries.
Yeah, listen, you can still support the show by rating us wherever you get your podcasts.
Just leave a 5-star review and a few kind words.
That, along with mentions on social media, is incredibly helpful.
Now, everybody, let's talk comics.
That's absolutely right. Now, Dave, it's time for an update, and you had some interesting information about Blue Sky.
Well, yes, if you remember correctly, Bradley, I'm just going to toot my own horn here.
Yeah.
Toot, toot. 5 or 6 weeks ago, I called it that I think Blue Sky is it. You know, we've been saying for a couple of years that we've been in, you know, this sort of liminal period between transitioning between platforms. And we had said in the past, Threads as a quote unquote new platform was not working. Twitter was a shitstorm. Instagram was not letting anybody link out.
Yes.
Mastodon was not it.
No.
And about 5 or 6 weeks ago, I called it. I said, everybody who's cool is on Blue Sky. This is the one that's going to take off. And boy, Brad, am I feeling good about that, because I'm seeing the beginning of an exponential curve, or at least the beginning of an S curve on Blue Sky. This last week, and we're currently in the week of November 13 as we record this, 1 million people jumped on Blue Sky. I mean, that's the beginning of an exponential curve, I feel like.
Yes.
And this is after the big influx of Brazilians. And it's so far, it has been a robust platform where, this is the most important thing, I am seeing results.
Yes.
I am able to link out.
Yes.
People are conversating.
They are conversating, yes.
People are conversating, Brad, about my comics. They're retweeting them. They're sharing them. There is life. There's a heartbeat. And it's so far, it's proven to be really good. I won't know until my next Kickstarter how it performs, because it's still growing. But on my last Kickstarter, remember, with like 1/10 of the size of my Twitter audience, I was getting 10 times what Twitter was doing in terms of links out. So it's really, I think, again, I'm going to draw that line in the sand. I think Blue Sky is it.
Yes. And listen, no one is more gobsmacked. No one is more surprised than I to find out that it's not Mastodon, but I'm glad it turned out to be something. But no, I will co-sign that. I've been seeing remarkable engagement, and I don't know. I know I've said it to you. I don't know whether I've said it on the show, but even when I post a comic update, which I am used to, like you post your comic on the other socials, and you can see that people viewed it, but they're not engaging with that post.
Right.
I'm posting comic updates there, and people are liking it. They're making comments on it, which is unheard of in this day and age. And heavens to Betsy, they're sharing it. Right. It is absolutely amazement. And again, the ability to link out and that you're not getting that throttled is very, very important.
Very
and
important.
Huge for people like us. I am really happy with what I'm seeing on Blue Sky right now.
Yeah. And I so rarely tell people what to do, but listen, this is the social media platform you want to start building on. I really, really think so. Everyone that I know that is interesting is there. And honest to God, I think audiences follow, and I'm not being shitty about this, audiences follow where the interesting people go. And so if all the culture makers that you enjoy are there, that's where you're going to go, even if you have a big following or a big, base on Twitter. If all the cool people have left to go to Blue Sky, I guarantee you the audiences are going to follow. It's going to take about a year or two, but the audiences are going to follow.
Now, Dave, if you don't want to talk about this on the show, we'll cut this part out. You made a big decision on Twitter just recently, did you not?
Yes, that's true, Brad. So in making the switch to Blue Sky, we all have a decision to make about our old Twitter accounts, which is what to do with them, right? And so there are bits of software out there that can scrape your entire post history so that you can save it. And that exists. That's the thing. I was on there for, 11 years, 15 years. So there's a lot of wasted time on Twitter, right? And I made up a personal decision that I just said, you know what? I'm moving forward. I deleted the whole damn thing. I didn't even freeze my account, because I don't want, Elon Musk to have that head count of 4. I want him to see that one more user is not just freezing their account and waiting for Peter Thiel to buy it out 6 years from now. I'm deleting my account entirely and I'm moving to Blue Sky. And I didn't archive anything. I just deleted the damn thing.
Wow.
Because Brad, what are we going to do? Have you ever had a box in your garage that you're like, oh, I might need this someday?
Yes.
And you're like,
ask my wife about that. There's a lot of those boxes.
It's 20 years later and you haven't even looked through the box. Never mind use the stuff in the box.
I know.
What am I going to do? Am I going to go through 15 years of posts on Twitter? No.
Right.
I'm a living, breathing human. I want to move forward. I don't want to go through my past. Who cares, you know?
Yeah.
So I just deleted the damn thing. I could care less about it.
I'm so interested in that. It took me a while. I got to that point with Instagram, but it was easier for me to pull the trigger on Instagram because I was never successful on Instagram. Right? I had nothing going on Instagram.
I also deleted my Instagram. I kept it because my wife sends me stuff on Instagram, but I deleted all my stuff on Instagram. Yes.
Yeah, I deleted my stuff, but I kept the account open because there's where a lot of messages come through and stuff. But I'm having a harder time coming to the conclusion of deleting my Twitter account for the reason that I had more success on Twitter, and it's harder for me to let that go. You know?
I will listen. I'm going to be too grandiose in the way I say this, so I'm just going to say it, and you can make fun of me. I think the hesitation to delete something like a Twitter account is a little bit of fear of death in the sense that you want to know that all that work is going to be remembered and the world is going to, someone's going to go through and be like, oh, this Brad Geiger, look at these 40,000 tweets. Everyone was a gem. Oh, everyone was a gem. No one gives a shit. You barely give a shit. Just delete it. You know what I mean?
It's not necessarily, it might be a fear of death. It's also the 7 stages of grief.
Yes,
grief,
that's fair.
And I'm still in bargaining and denial. Like, you know what? Elon Musk could, somebody else buys it or Elon Musk divests himself from it. And it goes back to the way it was in 2010. And I'm still in bargaining with that, even though,
it's not gonna happen.
Like you and I have both said right now, Twitter in 2010 or, that 2015, so forth, that sweet spot of where Twitter was, the golden age. That's happening right now on Blue Sky.
Yes. And literally everybody interesting who has interesting art, culture, politics, or thoughts, the thought leaders, basically, they're all on Blue Sky. I'm not shitting you.
Yes.
They're all there. And so they're not on Twitter anymore. And in fact, journalistic organizations like The Guardian, as I think you told me this morning, Brad, are starting to leave Twitter. So even news is going to, I bet you it's going to start slowly drifting off because they just don't want to be there. So I don't know that it's coming back. My personal thought is just have the strength to go, boop, I'm done, I'm gone.
Yeah.
Because it's going to be a box in your garage. It's going to be a digital box in your garage. You're never going to open that box. You're going to feel like, but listen, if you want to save it, fine.
Yeah. Well, I have taken the first step. I haven't posted on Twitter for about a week on either one of my accounts. Like nothing really.
And that's fine.
I've kind of already started that separation process.
Yeah. The thing is, and I can't emphasize this enough, and I know that it is unique just to me, but I think it can be universalized.
Yeah.
I had 10,000 people on Twitter. I had been tweeting for 10 or 15 years. I don't know. And I was only able to get, 3 people to my Kickstarter from Twitter?
I know.
That is bullshit. Why was I doing that?
Yeah.
Blue Sky, I had 1/10 of the people, and I was able to get 10 times as many people from Blue Sky, a tiny little platform at the time, to my Kickstarter. That's where we should be putting our energy.
A platform that had millions fewer users at the time your Kickstarter.
Tens of millions, yes.
It's just unbelievable.
So it is not doing the fundamental thing that we needed to do, which is support our careers.
Yeah.
Blue Sky, it's nascent, but it's doing that. And all the cool thought leaders are there, so the audience is going to continue to grow. So go to Blue Sky. I'm not joking with you all. I love you all dearly. Go to Blue Sky. Leave your Twitter accounts.
Let me ask you this: Social Media Week in the Kellett studio. Where are you posting right now? Like all your social media accounts.
Sure.
What are you posting right now? Where are you posting is the question.
Just Blue Sky. I gave
That's
up on Instagram.
amazing.
I gave up on Threads. I gave up on Facebook. I gave up on Twitter. I gave up on, well, I do Reddit every once in a blue moon. If there's a cartoon that specifically appeals to a 25-year-old male, because that feels like what the Reddit audience is, I will put one there.
Yeah.
But everything else goes on Blue Sky and just on Blue Sky.
I got to tell you, I'm getting to the, Instagram, I'm out. Threads, way out. Facebook, unfortunately, I had a couple of Facebook user, like fan pages. Remember those fan pages?
Sure.
And the problem is I keep forgetting to post there now because I get such little engagement. I keep forgetting to post there. So I do have people there, but I'm going to have to find a way to move them. I keep telling them to migrate to Substack. I'm going to have to just shut it down because literally I keep, it'll be 2 or 3 weeks and I'm like, oh shit, I didn't post anything on my Facebook page. So Facebook, technically I've stopped, even though I haven't stopped. Twitter, I'm getting there. Mastodon, I never had success with. Right now and Reddit disgusts me so much. Like posting long form on Reddit for me hasn't been very beneficial.
Yeah, Drive has never worked on Reddit. Yeah, agreed.
I will say this: over October, I was posting that Halloween countdown on Imager. And I got some good results on Imager. I like the experience better. I like the audience better. So I might go back and start experimenting with long form there. But even so, I had a couple of viral days on Imager. I didn't notice it in my Patreon or anything else per se. I didn't see big results, but I do think that Imager might still be worth experimenting with. But I'm getting to the point, Dave, where I'm kind of getting to where you are, where it's going to end up being Blue Sky, Substack, which I still count as
I will probably start doing
media.
Substack if you continue to have success with it.
Yeah, and Imager.
Yeah, I want to say to you, Brad, specifically, but also to all of our listeners, that I think there's 2 things that we all need to face with our older social media platforms that are not performing and frankly owned by American oligarchs, which is sunk cost fallacy and also Marie Kondo. Those 2 things will get you where you need to go.
Yeah.
So sunk cost fallacy, the idea is that, well, I've put 15 years into it. Surely it has value. No.
Yeah.
Is it producing for you today? Then no, it does not have value. It does not matter that you've been on there 10 years, 15 years. It does not matter that you think you have an audience of 10,000 people on there. First of all, most of them have frozen their accounts or are bots.
Yeah.
Or if not most, then a huge chunk of them. The remaining real humans are being algorithmically limited from seeing your stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And so the second part of it is Marie Kondo. Thank the social media platform for what it used to be and what it did give you at a key point in your career, Brad, and move on. Because there is no use in posting on Twitter anymore.
No, you're not telling me anything I don't know deep down inside. And
you can feel it. You can feel it, you know?
There's just nothing there. And I mean, not to go too far down the Marie Kondo rabbit hole, but it doesn't bring me joy to post there. It's not
fundamentally
not a happy
it's like we were saying with the humor writing earlier, you know?
Yeah.
If you're passionate about posting on Blue Sky, it will succeed for you because you're joyfully there, joyfully sharing stuff, joyfully building a community. Twitter is like walking into a doctor's office where they're also going to hit you with a stick. It's like nothing about that is joyful, you know?
And right now, I've got to focus on things that are bringing me joy. And honestly, you know what's bringing me joy? You want to know the truth about what's bringing me joy these days? Being able to spend time talking comics with one of my very, very good friends, Dave Kellett, at which every time I get a chance to, I get to say that you've been listening to Comic Lab, the show about making comics and making a living from comics.
Your hosts have been my friend Brad Geiger, who I will now Marie Kondo and say, I thank you, Brad, for the joy you brought me, and I wish you well as I pass you along to the world. He's the editor of webcomics.com.
Am I dying?
And he's the creator of Evil Inc. at evilcomic.com.
And my friend Dave Kellett, the joyful co-director of the comics documentary Stripped and the cartoonist of Sheldon at sheldoncomics.com and the joy-bringing Drive at drivecomic.com.
Also, another thing about Marie Kondo that I really admire, she always looks so put together. Like, there's never a hair out of place. There's never a loose thread on. I wonder, though, if she's annoying to be around in that regard, if she's too put together. You know what I mean?
At some point, don't you, like, if you were Marie Kondo's friend, don't you want to just sit down and have the nasty gossip session, too?
Yes.
Okay, I get it, that's joyful, but let's talk about Joan and that thing that's growing out of her lip.
But also, can you imagine Marie Kondo eating a really big, messy bit of spaghetti? Like, there would not be a drop. That would be so annoying that it would be so carefully eaten that there would never be a drop of spaghetti sauce anyway. So I'm going to say the Comic Lab theme song is used with permission from Andy Creighton at theworldrecord.net, and this episode was edited by our ever wonderful Matt Woodard of Woodsong Productions over at www.woodsong.media.
If you love Comic Lab, and we know that you do, you can rate and review the show on Apple Podcasts and on Spotify, and you may hear your review featured on a future episode like this one. This one comes in, the headline is Feet First, Eggs in Basket. As a cartoonist myself, I have learned to seek the love others have for cartooning and comics that goes beyond the norm. The people that have dived in feet first to the dark chasm, not knowing what lies at the bottom. The people that put all their eggs in one basket and then jammed in some more despite the cracks. Those are my people. Brad and Dave are those people. Thanks for the fun and insightful podcast, Dave and Brad.
I have to say, that is a really good description of Brad. He has absolutely shoved his eggs where they don't belong. So that's...
That old egg shover Brad.
Old Brad Geiger and his eggs. And I'm going to say Comic Lab is made possible by your support on patreon.com/Comic Lab. So we will go ahead and say that twice. Patreon.com/now I have an image of Brad's eggs.